more white guys in this place than there are in my whole school.
You can have main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today is the first episode we are recording in a few weeks. And it is the first episode we are recording since the protests regarding police brutality towards African-American men and women. And the reason we took that break was because it was hard to get invested in a show about white people in the 1950s with all of that going on. And it maybe felt a little bit insidious to look at all of that and just focus on the escapism of a time when things were even worse for Black people in America than they are now. And things are pretty bad now. But we have a platform, however small it is, and we have a responsibility to use it. So we are going to continue releasing episodes now, and we're also going to encourage our listeners to do whatever they can to help, to donate, to protest, to sign petitions, call their representatives, just whatever you can.
Very well said. Actually, this is an interesting episode for us to come back in on. There's some odd police things actually going on in this very episode.
Yup. It's a case of serendipity. Horrifying serendipity.
So what episode are we talking about this week?
Season 4, episode 23, Spunky Come Home.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Spunky Come Home.
We open in the Cunningham living room, where Joni is hula hooping. Marion is impressed by how easy Joni makes it look.
Oh, Joni, that's wonderful. You just make that look so easy.
Yeah, well...
But demurs when Joni suggests she give it a try. It's not for a mature woman. Joni says she's only saying so because she can't do it, and Marion tries to prove her wrong. As Richie comes downstairs, Marion shows that Joni wasn't entirely wrong about her skill level. Richie laughs, and Marion says he couldn't do it either.
Can't sew.
Cannot.
Can't sew.
Marion remarks that Howard left for 2 days and she's become a little kid. Joni says Howard is pulling up in the driveway right now. Howard runs inside, demanding someone bring him his shotgun. There's a wolf in the garage.
All I saw was a blur of fangs.
Marion is disbelieving, and Richie says it was probably just Fonzie's dog, who he got for protection. Howard asks protection from what? And Joni says, girls. Fonzie enters through the front door and demands to know who the turkey is who woke up his dog, before he welcomes Howard home. Howard mutters that at least one person acknowledged his arrival, and Richie says it's hard to hug a man who runs in shouting, Wolf! 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 Howard makes him go get his suitcase. Fonzie calls him his pet Spunky, an adorable little white dog who immediately starts playing with Fonzie as Joni mocks Howard for thinking she was a wolf. Howard says she looked a lot bigger in the dark. Marion says most dogs don't like Howard and sits him down at the table. Joni goes to get Howard milk and cookies.
Here's your milk and delicious diet thins. Oreos coming up.
Howard doesn't think too highly of a man who needs a dog for protection from girls. Fonzie justifies himself with an anecdote about a date being interrupted by another girl showing up outside his apartment.
I'm sitting up in my apartment with Roberta Rigaboni, having a great time, if you get my drift.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, and all of a sudden Stacy Lubitsky comes knocking on my door yelling, surprise!
Howard reluctantly admits Spunky is a cute dog, even though she keeps barking at him. Howard says Fonzie can't keep Spunky, so Fonzie tells him about her sad, sad life. Fonzie met her at the pound, where it was her last day, and the guards were taking her down that long last mile.
Dead man walking.
Howard asks if Fonzie is being just a little overdramatic, despite the fact that Fonzie has been living with him for like a year, and he should know that the answer to that question is always yes. Fonzie, proving my point, holds Spunky up to Howard and demands he tell her she's spending the rest of her life on the street. Howard says Fonzie can keep the dog.
And there was much rejoicing.
The next day, Howard comes downstairs asking about the racket. Marion says the boys are building a fence so Spunky can have her own little piece of the yard and won't attack Howard again. Ralph comes in, calls Howard Howie, and asks if they have any more wood. As Posse joins him, Howard asks Marion why they're using his wood. Marion thought Howard wouldn't mind, but he does. He was saving that very expensive wood to make a workbench. Ralph notes that Fonzie said, only the best. Howard says next Fonzie will want wall-to-wall carpeting. Potsy asks if he has some, and Howard tries to attack Potsy while Marion holds him back. Ralph and Potsy flee. Marion says Howard's wood is still technically in the yard. Howard says he hopes there's enough wood to make Marion a chair, so she can sit on it. Later, Ralph and Potsy are looking for Spunky inside, having lost her outside.
Probably checking out the local fire hydrants.
Ralph is horrified they lost Fonzie's dog. Potsy asks if he'll hurt them, and Ralph pops a cap off a bottle to demonstrate what Fonzie's gonna do to them. Richie enters, and asks where Spunky is. Ralph stammers out that Spunky is probably with Fonzie.
It's Fonzie's dog? She must be with Fonzie.
Only for Fonzie to come in, Spunky-less. Ralph says he'll tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Somebody stole Fonzie's dog. Fonzie looks at Richie, then runs outside. Later at Arnold's, Joni hangs up the payphone and tells Fonzie the FBI won't put out an all-points bulletin on his dog. Fonzie says he has to do something, and Joni says she'll keep trying. She pulls out a megaphone and walks out.
All right, Spunky, we know you're out there. Come out with your paws up.
Fonzie sits down at a table with a girl and shows her a picture of Spunky, asking if she's ever seen this dog. She isn't sure. Richie takes Fonzie aside, both to tell him that he needs to calm down, and also to tell him that the picture of Spunky he drew is kind of bad. The audience sees that it's just a stick figure.
It is kind of hard to tell with this particular drawing. If you look at it from a distance, you know.
Richie assures Fonzie they'll find Spunky. They're all looking, they're calling around, and they even put an ad in the newspapers. Fonzie says,
Crooks don't answer ads, Rich.
in come Ralph and Potsy with a brown dog. Fonzie is not impressed. Does that dog look like Spunky? Does that dog look like the picture? Ralph bursts out laughing, only to immediately recant when Fonzie says he drew it.
Good one, Fonz. Nice detail. The legs and the tail.
Then an old woman comes in, grabs her dog back from Ralph, and leaves. Ralph claims he found the dog in front of a supermarket, and it could have been waiting for a bus. Fonzie laments that whoever took Spunky could be anywhere by now. Potsy says he heard they take them to Mexico and paint them, and Richie has to correct him that that's cars. Richie asks Fonzie why he's sure someone took Spunky. Ralph didn't see who took the dog after all. Fonzie point blank asks if Ralph would leave open the gate and let Spunky get out. Ralph denies it. Fonzie concludes that someone must have stolen Spunky. Ralph and Potsy go to look some more. Richie tells Fonzie that dogs are capable of amazing things.
Like, I saw this war movie one time where Lassie got separated from her master.
Did she find her way home?
Richie doesn't remember if Lassie made it home, though, because he saw it at a drive-in with Carol Kleinschmidt, and she was blowing in his ear as Richie leaves. He says he's pretty sure Lassie made it. She's made a lot of movies since then. Fonzie hits the jukebox in frustration as he thinks of whoever took Spunky. Hound Dog starts playing. Later, Al brings in Officer Porter, a police sketch artist, to help Fonzie. Fonzie shows him the picture of Spunky he already drew. It only confuses Porter. Al gives a detailed description of Spunky.
It's a fox terrier. You see, it's all fuzzy, and it's a smart dog.
Only for Fonzie to say he'll describe his dog, and probably give a much worse description.
She's about 1'6", and she's about hairy and female.
Yeah?
He grabs Al to help, comparing Al's droopy cheeks and sad eyes to Spunky's. Porter offers a picture of a dog with Al's face. The next day, Fonzie is sitting in an empty Arnold's, dejected, as Richie tries to cheer him up.
Fonz, could always get some female companionship.
But not even the possibility of female companionship is enough to lift Fonzie's spirits. Ralph and Potsy come in, with Potsy insisting they have to tell Fonzie the truth. Ralph stalls, and right as he's about to tell Fonzie the truth, in comes Officer Porter carrying Spunky. Fonzie takes her into his arms and tells her not to trust strangers. Potsy asks if they caught the guy who stole Spunky. Ralph says that nobody stole Spunky, then covers for himself that that must be the case, since Spunky was brought in alone. Porter says that's not the case.
I have him in the car.
Good work, Officer. Officer Porter, bring in the culprit.
Porter goes to bring him in, and Fonzie assures Richie he's just going to talk to the guy, with his fists. Potsy tells Ralph they have to talk to Fonzie as Ralph drags him to the restroom. Richie helps Fonzie warm up, even as he tries to tell Fonzie not to do anything crazy. Porter brings in the suspect, a young black boy, and Fonzie realizes he's just a kid. The kid, Wilbur's response is,
Good guess. What was your first clue?
He's a little kid with a big mouth.
Porter asks if Fonzie wants to press charges. Wilbur asks what for. Walking a dog? Fonzie says he wants to talk to him, and Porter gives him 5 minutes. Richie asks for his name. As Fonzie goes into the restroom, Richie asks for the kid's name, and he gets Whitey 4. Richie says Wilbur has nothing to worry about. Wilbur says they will if they don't get back his dog. Fonzie asks if he has an older brother he can hit, and Wilbur challenges him to a fight for his dog. Richie thinks Wilbur is telling the truth, but Wilbur tells him to stay out of it. This is between him and Clyde, a nickname Fonzie dislikes.
This is between me and Clyde.
He called me Clyde again.
Ralph and Potsy rush out, begging Fonzie not to do anything rash. Wilbur remarks that there are more white guys here than in his entire school. Ralph tells the truth.
Gotta tell you the truth. He didn't steal Spunky. You see, she got loose and ran out of the yard. It was Potsy's fault.
Well, mostly. He says it was Potsy's fault. The two of them protest it was an accident, and Fonzie says he doesn't care about accidents. He cares that they lied to him. Ralph and Potsy cover their eyes. Fonzie slams his hand on the table. Ralph blurts out, "Oh good, he hit Potsy." Fonzie orders both of them into his office. Richie tells Wilbur he can see why Wilbur would be upset, what with being grabbed by cops. But he has nothing to be scared of. Wilbur says he's not scared of nothing and punches Richie in the gut. Richie chuckles uncomfortably and says he didn't mean scared. And also, that was a good punch.
Good punch.
You're lucky I held back.
Wilbur says Richie's lucky he held back, and he has 30 seconds to get out of the way. Richie remarks that Wilbur really likes that dog. Wilbur continues to mime punches, and Richie imitates him.
What's it to you,
Clyde.
Almost getting a smile out of him, then getting him to laugh a little. Fonzie comes back out and tells Wilbur he knows he didn't steal Fonzie's dog. Wilbur already knew that. Fonzie says he's not pressing charges, and Richie leaves after jokingly telling Fonzie to watch out for this kid's right.
Listen, kid, I really understand that you didn't steal my dog, you know? But the thing is that you should have looked for her owner.
Well, she had no name tag, and she didn't know her phone number.
Fonzie says he appreciates that Wilbur took good care of Spunky, and he must really like dogs. As Richie comes back inside, Spunky barks, and Fonzie tells her to settle down. Seeing Spunky respond to her name makes Wilbur realize she really is Fonzie's dog. He decides to let her stay with Fonzie. Fonzie says that tomorrow morning, Wilbur is going to meet him here, and they're going to get him his own dog. He offers a hand, and Richie high-fives him. Fonzie pointedly says that wasn't for him. Wilbur high-fives him, and then Spunky does too. The four of them all leave together. Ralph and Potsy come out of the bathroom. Since Fonzie didn't say they could leave, they decide to go back in, only for Fonzie to briefly re-enter to tell them they can go, after they promise not to lie to him again. Then Fonzie tells Spunky not to run away from home, because he loves her. Aww. The next night in the Cunningham living room, Fonzie tells Richie about a new trick he taught Spunky, who is being taken for a walk by Howard. Howard comes home with Spunky in his arms.
I thought you didn't like her.
Oh, that's a vicious rumor.
Fonzie starts to explain the trick to Richie. He's at home, with a chick. There's the sound of kissing. Marion and Joni come down, interested in Spunky's new trick. Fonzie quickly claims he's still working on it. Marion kisses Fonzie on the cheek, and at the sound of kissing, Spunky jumps onto the couch and turns off the lamp.
Thank you, Peter. That was Spunky Come Home, which first aired back on March 15th, 1977. That night, Happy Days served as the lead-in to the premiere episode of 8 is Enough. The pilot features Diana Hyland, Dick Van Patten, and Susan Richardson, all of whom had made memorable guest appearances on Happy Days. At that point, though, the cast of 8 is Enough also included a young Mark Hamill.
What do you recommend, David?
Dad, I think I should move out of the house for good. We'll both be better off this way.
Who had to drop out after an auto accident. Fortunately, he had a movie coming out that year. Meanwhile, CBS had a new episode of Who's Who, and NBC aired highlights of the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, hosted by Gene Kelly. The star attraction that night was animal trainer Gunther Gable Williams.
The greatest animal trainer I have ever met, Gunther Gable Williams.
Spunky Come Home was directed by the one and only Jerry Paris, and it was written by Arthur Silver and Fred Fox Jr. This season, Fred had written A Shot in the Dark, while Arthur had co-written Fonzie Loves Pinky Parts 1 and 2. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Aaron Blunt as Wilbur. A child actor from Los Angeles, Aaron is best known for his recurring role as Ahmad Abdul-Rahim in the Bad News Bears film series.
The Bad News Bears. It was a team of superstars like Mike Engelberg, Rudy Stein, Ahmad Abdul-Rahim. With a team like this, there is only one way you can go.
He appeared in the 1976 original and 2 sequels, but not in the TV version. Aaron's other films include Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich and Car Wash. On the small screen, Aaron was in everything from Get Christy Love to Quincy, and he had a recurring role on The Waltons as a character called Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster told me to do it.
Aaron later got out of acting altogether to become a DJ. So, Peter, what did you think of Aaron Blunt as Wilbur?
He was terrific. This episode has some weird racial politics, but that is not Aaron Blunt's fault by any means. He does a great job with the character of Wilbur. He gives him a lot of life. He's very funny in how he just has no time for any of Fonzie's crap. This episode has a lengthy scene of Fonzie and Richie being mocked and humiliated by a 10 or 11-year-old, and I like that a lot. But that being said, it's a lot more disturbing than I think this episode intends, that this black child got picked up by the police just for walking a dog. He doesn't know what he did wrong. He doesn't know what they're going to do to him. There's the possibility that charges are going to be pressed against him just for finding a dog and walking her. And the fact that he's not afraid at all, I didn't know if that helps or not, but yeah, it was on my mind while watching this episode. But Aaron Blunt is very good.
It's difficult not to think about the racial issues in this episode because of the times that we're living in, but to me it was a comfort that Aaron Blunt as Wilbur is not the least bit intimidated, or at least it's not going to give them the satisfaction of appearing intimidated.
Scared? I'm not scared of nothing.
Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in America.
Yeah.
So Aaron's character has every right to be upset here. And obviously it's ridiculous that this kid is picked up and is almost arrested for the supposed crime of stealing this dog. But I think he has to have this attitude to get through life in Milwaukee. He has to be tougher to just get through this time that he's living in this place that he's living in. So you can definitely see that in the way Aaron Blunt plays this character. And it's actually kind of funny to see him punch Ron Howard right in the stomach.
That was great.
We also have Tom Deaver as Officer Porter, a TV actor of the 1970s and 80s. Tom is probably best known for his 5 appearances on MASH. He also guested on The $6 Million Man, Cagney and Lacey, and When Things Were Rotten. Tom's film roles include The Daring Dobermans and The Last Porno Flick, also known as Those Mad Movie Makers. He's also in the utterly mind-boggling 1977 sci-fi film The Brain Machine that I once suffered through on VHS under the name Gray Matter.
Oh, no.
Someone has broken into the top secret files.
You know what's missing?
2 things, sir. The Brain Machine file and Dr. Krishna's project file.
I can't even explain it. It's public domain now, so it's easy to find. What did you think, if anything, of Tom Deaver as Officer Porter?
I got the sense that Officer Porter wasn't very smart. I got the sense that he's the kind of guy who just does his job and doesn't really think about it deeper than that. The biggest example of that is how he just drew Spunky with Al's face, because Fonzie said she had Al's sad eyes and droopy cheeks. But it's also rather disturbingly evident with how he just arrested this child for the suspected crime of stealing a dog.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting about this character is that he starts off as just sort of, as you say, kind of a dimwit. He's just this guy who's going through the motions of doing his job. He doesn't seem that sinister. But then when he arrests Wilbur and then seems intent on bringing Wilbur in for questioning or booking, you see sort of another side to this character. And I think Tom Deaver basically just plays him as a blank.
Yeah, which makes him all the more terrifying. He should not have a gun.
Absolutely not. He should be doing something else with his life, I think, Officer Porter. Happy Days Extra, Hillary Horan gets a rare credited role as Peggy, the girl who fails to identify Fonzie's dog.
Well, maybe I have seen her. No, I'm not too sure.
Henry Winkler steps on one of her lines, though. Did you notice Hillary Horan in this episode as Peggy?
I did. Her scene was very funny and set up one of the best jokes in the episode with the fact that Fonzie cannot draw for shit.
Nope. He draws a stick figure dog and then expects everyone to recognize it. And I was happy to see that Hillary Horan gets a credited part. Spunky, although uncredited, was played by a familiar TV dog named Scruffy. The Encyclopedia of TV Pets says that Scruffy was a wire-haired fox terrier of questionable ancestry. Born in 1966 and trained by Carl Miller, Scruffy was best known for the late 1960s sitcom The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, co-starring Charles Nelson Riley.
Mrs. Muir, if I am to continue my work, I must have protection from all attacks. From animal, human, and you know who.
Scruffy, I promise you Claymore won't happen again.
I certainly hope so.
After that show was canceled, Scruffy was typecast and couldn't get a job for 2 years. Eventually, though, the trained pooch did start landing TV roles on Barnaby Jones, Kung Fu, Rockford Files, Mannix, and much more. Scruffy also did a very memorable TV commercial for Chuckwagon dog food. He died in 1981. So, Peter, what did you think of Scruffy as Spunky?
5 stars. Excellent job. A very good dog, and very adorable.
And so well trained. I thought the lamp trick at the end of the episode was quite impressive. And I was shocked that Spunky was not credited, but no, I had to go looking for the name of Scruffy, the dog who played Spunky. As for songs this week, we have Are You Lonesome Tonight and Hound Dog, both by Elvis Presley. Obviously not the real Elvis Presley on the soundtrack. And Pretend by Nat King Cole. Obviously we have Ike Cole, Nat's brother, filling in for him. Cultural and historical references for the week. The episode's title is a reference to the 1943 film Lassie Come Home, based on the 1940 novel of the same name by Eric Knight.
Yes, great books do make great movies. Major Eric Knight wrote many fine stories. One of them you've seen in pictures, this above all. But his greatest story was Lassie Come Home. Lassie is the story of a dog and a boy. Oh, it isn't a pretentious picture or an epic. It is too real, too human, too beautiful for high-sounding adjectives.
Lassie Come Home was the first of 11 films about the courageous collie, with the most recent being in 2005. The earliest dog to portray Lassie was named Pal. Joni's hula hooping is back. Just as a reminder, the national hula hooping fad goes back to the summer of 1958 when a plastic version of the toy was marketed by the Wham-O Company of California. It was based on an exercise hoop made of bamboo sold in Australia. Joan Anderson, the woman who brought the hoop back to America and thought of the name hula hoop, received none of the profits from Wham-O. I was shocked by this. She got nothing out of all that. They ripped her off.
That is some real bullshit. The Hudsucker Proxy lied to me.
I developed it myself. Yes, sirree, this is my ticket upstairs. You know, for kids.
There are porcelain conventions, by the way.
Well, what would you do at a porcelain convention?
I don't know, but if I got tired, I'd always have plenty of good places to sit down.
But they are for collectors of porcelain figurines or porcelain dinnerware.
It would also make a great name for a band. Just putting that out there.
Joni, get your father some milk.
And some Oreo cookies.
Diet Thins.
Oreo cookies have been marketed by Nabisco since 1912. The thin version was only introduced in 2015. Marion might be referring to Diet Thins, a brand of matzo crackers manufactured by the Manischewitz Company of Newark, New Jersey in the 1970s. Ralph says, "So I'm not Abe Lincoln," when he is caught lying. Abraham Lincoln's nickname Honest Abe actually derives from his very successful legal career in the 1850s. The war movie that Richie seems to be referring to is Son of Lassie from 1945 with Peter Lawford. It's the second Lassie movie, again with Pal in the lead role. Frick and Frack refers to a duo of comedic Swiss ice skaters. They found fame in a traveling revue called the Ice Follies in the 1930s, and they later did their act on film.
Yes, we hear you clearly from the mountain. Oh, the lane.
They would wear lederhosen and perform acrobatic routines on the ice. Do you go in for that kind of stuff? The ice capades, the ice follies? Is that
Not really, no. I never went through an ice skating phase the way some kids did. I'm sure that there's an alternate universe where I did, but yeah, that's not my thing.
Clyde is 1950s slang for a stupid or inept person. That's why Fonzie gets so upset when he's called Clyde repeatedly. And Edward Charles Whitey Ford is a retired Major League Baseball player from New York City. He played for the New York Yankees from 1950 to 1967, spending his entire career on that team. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1974. His nickname derives from his very blonde hair. I mainly know him for being knocked out by a bunch of pretzels in an episode of The Simpsons.
Thousands and thousands of people saw your pretzels injuring Whitey Ford.
You could call them Whitey Whackers.
Other observations this week. For a concerned pet owner, Fonzie casually lets Spunky walk right out the Cunningham's front door during the first scene.
Yeah, that really confused me because my family has 3 dogs and we have to be very careful not to accidentally let them out the front door or let them out of the yard because we are terrified of losing them. Because we live in Chicago and there's a very real possibility they could get hit by a car or something.
I was very disappointed in Fonzie's carelessness.
Maybe that was normal for the 1950s. I don't know.
It always bothers me in sitcoms when they're obviously filmed on a soundstage and nobody bothers to close the door when they come into a house or apartment.
It's the middle of summer and you're letting out the cool air.
For me, the episode's comedic highlight is the old lady hitting Ralph with her purse.
I just used the old mouth charm.
He really deserves it this week.
He really, really does.
So Ralph really is at his worst this week. Potsy is not really the most honest or principled of individuals, and even he has more of a conscience than Ralph. And even after the jig is up, Ralph tries to throw Potsy under the bus.
Ralph's whole thing this episode is, it's kind of funny up until Wilbur gets dragged into this. Because he's just a kid, and also he's black in a country that disproportionately polices and punishes black people for crimes, even if they are incredibly minor, and Ralph possibly could have gotten Wilbur killed. So, yeah, not cool, Ralph.
Yeah, this was really a bad moment for Ralph Malph, because he is about to let a black kid take the rap for something that he basically did himself in a very segregated city in the 1950s. Like, this is a very cowardly act by Ralph Malph.
Yeah, although I guess he eventually admitted to Fonzie the kind of truth.
Yeah, I guess so, but only under extreme duress. And even when he is caught, he tries to blame Potsy for the whole thing.
Which is better than blaming Wilbur, at least.
Yeah, I guess it's a step up from blaming Wilbur. So this week we have another Amundo. Cool Amundo? Really happy days, cool Amundo.
Richie's a square, I don't know what to tell you.
This is my thinking about the episode. I honestly thought that Fonzie was going to give Wilbur that dog, but the episode went in another direction. What I thought was going to happen was that Fonzie was going to see that this dog actually means a lot more to Wilbur than it does to himself. And he was going to nobly give that dog to Wilbur as a way of compensating him for this ridiculous injustice that's being done. But that's obviously the episode goes in another direction and Fonzie keeps the dog. I have to ask, I will defer to you on this. Do we ever see or hear about Spunky ever again?
Spunky appears in one more episode, where she inexplicably changes gender and becomes a boy dog. So I feel like this episode maybe would have been better if it ended with some sort of shared custody agreement, where sometimes Spunky got to stay with Fonzie and sometimes with Wilbur, and then they could have explained Spunky being away with, like, oh, Spunky is with Wilbur this week.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to add an animal to a series, that's kind of a big deal because then you're going to have an animal trainer on set every week, and it's a whole other set of responsibilities and hassles. So I didn't think they were going to want to go down that particular road, and I thought for sure that the show is going to forget about Spunky pretty soon. Is that second Spunky appearance, is that this season?
No.
Is it at least a thing like Chuck, where Chuck is gone, but they kind of talk about Chuck for a while? Do they?
I don't think they do. I don't think they mention Spunky in between now and their next appearance.
So Fonzie is a neglectful dog owner. Again, I guess he just...
Which is out of character, because he really loves that dog. He would spoil the heck out of that dog.
Well, speaking of which, my last point is, Fonz, you might want to invest in a leash and dog tags.
Maybe those hadn't been invented yet in the 1950s.
Rope had been invented in the 1950s. You could tie some little rope around the dog's collar or something. I mean, I was very disappointed in Fonz as a dog owner this week. I'm sorry. I didn't think he was being a very responsible dog owner.
He was not. He loves that dog, but that doesn't mean he is a responsible owner.
So, Peter, I will ask, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions this week?
I really like the dress that Joni was wearing at Arnold's. It was plaid. It had kind of a full skirt. It was strapped, and she was wearing it over a short-sleeved white shirt with a collar. It looked really, really classy and really 1950s.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question, was this episode any good?
Yes. But it was extremely uncomfortable to watch, mostly because of the racial aspects. There's a lot I like about it. It's very funny. This is an episode where Fonzie is kind of a massive doofus in the episode. He's terrible at drawing. He and Richie get humiliated by an 11-year-old, and Fonzie is just being this overdramatic dork who loves his dog, and I love that for him.
Has anybody seen my dog? Has anybody seen my dog? He's gone and left me, whoa, 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 why'd he ever have to go?
But at the same time, this is an episode where a black kid gets arrested for an extremely minor crime that he didn't even realize was a crime because all he did was find a dog and take it for a walk. And that's extremely disturbing for all the reasons we've talked about. He's black, he's in the United States, these are the police, he's in an extremely segregated and racist city. It's the 1950s.
Yeah, I would say that the racial aspect of this story makes it a little more uncomfortable than the makers of Happy Days probably intended it to be. This is probably just intended to be a cute story about Fonzie and his dog, and it ends up being a story about a kid who just narrowly escapes being railroaded through the legal system for some basically invented crime, and you get to see an incompetent police officer, and you begin to worry about what could have happened to Wilbur had the truth not come out. On the other hand, you have this dog who can do all these tricks, and of course you have Fonzie fawning and cooing over the dog.
Yeah, it's a weird juxtaposition.
It is. And since the dog doesn't really become a major character on Happy Days, and the show doesn't become Fonzie and his dog and the Happy Days gang, this episode feels a little bit low stakes in some ways so I would say this was another classic back half of the season, let's get another episode done kind of show. It's perfectly enjoyable. I thought a lot of it was cute and funny, so overall I will give it a pass.
Yeah.
So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Vulfranx. That's VULFRANX.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysare.ours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysarepodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Ralph runs a gambling operation in The Last of the Big Time Mouse.
A Ralph episode. I was not expecting that. So, see you later, alligator?
In a while, crocodile.
My girl just called me up and woke me from my sleep. You should have heard the things she said. You know she hurt my feelings deep. I'm gonna buy me a dog, 'cause I need a friend now. I'm gonna buy me a dog, 'cause my little girl, she don't love me no how. I've been used and pushed on, just like a handle on a door. But now I'm making certain that I don't get used no more. I'm gonna buy me a dog, 'cause I need a friend now. She don't love me no how.